Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Darkomitov and this is Split Polygon. So in this mini series we're looking at how can we make naturalistic environments for people who are not into look dev and lighting, just to kind of give them a soft kind of introduction into the world of look development. Now this chapter we're going to be looking at shaders, specifically the AI standard shader. AI standard is a monolithic shader that kind of creates a lot of different varieties of materials, and you can use it for pretty much most, well, 99% of the materials that you're going to create is going to be done with that shader. So let's dive right into it. I have a bunch of spheres in the scene. They're laying on the same floor that we assigned that shadow mat, so they're kind of casting shadow, and they're just default Lambert for now. So let's do assign new material Arnold AI standard surface. I'm gonna click that and I'm gonna start the render. And notice one thing that's gonna happen. That sphere become a lot brighter. Now why is that? Well, Arnold's material is designed to work with the lights, and it's a material, it's energy conservant material, so it has a lot more physical properties, while the Lambert is not so much. It's an older model. So just by creating it, you're gonna get the proper brightness of, if I go to right click material attributes, so the white color with this environment would give you this result, and that's a lot closer to reality than what this is doing. Now by default this one has specular or reflection. I'm gonna disable this for now because we're going to look at the properties of this guy. So first up we have the weight, and the weight is pretty much a how much of this color is going to be allowed on the material, on the, yeah, how much of this color is going to go on the object. And this is like, it's like um, yeah, it's scaling it down pretty much. So if I have something like a pink, and then if I crank this up all the way to 1, this pink is looking like this only if this is set to 1. If I start to dial this down, we're no longer seeing this pink. This pink is darkened by 0.58 before it goes to the render view. All right, so just something to kind of be mindful of. By default it's set to 0.8. It's because it's energy conservant and all that, but I found most of the time I like to use this one, use it at 1. And so I know that the exact color that I set here is going to be rendered. And then if this is too bright, I would rather control it with my color rather than clamping it with the slider. Okay, it's just a preference. All right, so let's make a, I don't know, a glossy plastic, like a reflective plastic material. So the diffuse roughness is taking, well, first of all, let's break it down a little bit more. So we have a diffuse component, a specular component. So these are the main two components that make up the look of the plastic. So the diffuse is how the color is looks like, and how the color is um, uh, yeah, how the color is transformed uh, as it rolls off over the surface. Now this is set to 0, which means that this is smooth object. If I take the diffuse roughness and I start to bump it up, it's going to start to darken a little bit. And what this is simulating, it's a lot of tiny little imperfections on the surface that is breaking up how the light sees this color and sends it to camera. So to demonstrate is, if you have a light coming in from 45-degree angle, and if this was 100% smooth surface, it would bounce off on the same angle as it comes in. But if this was a rough object, when it touches the object, based on what kind of bumpiness it's gonna interact with, it may reflect on a different angle, like a lot steeper or a lot shallower angle. So this is what this is simulating. It's a subtle effect, but I use it sometimes to make like rough, like a plywood or a cardboard or like a dry concrete kind of effect. Even dust, I use it for dust a lot because dust has, you know, this kind of rough look to it. So I use that, but for the plastic, we're not going to use it. Metalness is pretty self-explanatory if your object is a metallic or non-metallic. This should be used as on and off switch. There's no halfway metallic object in real world. So unless it's like a metallic object has been painted, but that usually is not done like this. You usually would layer different materials to get that kind of effect. So you want metal? Well, it's a metal. You want non-metal? It's like a dielectric or a conductor, pretty much. So this is a dielectric. So we're gonna stick to non-metal, and we're gonna introduce some reflection, which is called specular. So if I bump this up, you're gonna start to see the reflections of the environment on the actual model. Now, this is controlled by the roughness. If the roughness is set to 0, 0 means black, 1 means white. Okay? In the roughness world, 0 is reflective. Okay? So this is going to be important for later, so keep this in mind. 0 means black, and black means reflective. So the bigger the number, the closer to 1 we get, the more that reflection is going to start to soften and disperse. Now this roughness is very similar to the diffuse roughness, but this is on the reflection or on the specular level. So this was distributing the color, and this one is distributing the specular. And you can use this in combination to create some interesting effects. So let's make something that is kind of soft, blurry reflection. Now, what if I want to have a soft, blurry reflection, but I want to also have a sharp reflection on top? Well, if you scroll down, you have a coat. A coat is literally a coating. Like if you take this plastic, if this was a soft plastic that has a kind of like a blurry reflection, and if you dipped it into like a coat layer, and if I would introduce that, so this would be that. So you have the blurry reflection underneath and you have the coat reflection on top. Usually the coat is never as strong as the original reflection, so you can just dial this down quite a bit. So you get a layered effect, a bit more realistic and a bit more um, complex shader, right? So this is our glossy plastic. Let's move on to our next shader. Let's see what we can make. Let's make a metal just because we talked about it. Let's see, assign new material, Arnold's AI standard. I'm gonna go right click, add to favorites, and we're gonna see why I did that later. I'm gonna click this. All right, to make metal, as you saw, is you take metalness and you bump it up to 1. And there is your metal. It's literally as simple as that. Now, of course, you can tweak this a lot to make it look better, but already this looks amazing for a 1-second switch. Then you have your roughness. That means that you can make like aluminium or chrome, or you can try to experiment with stuff like if you take the specular color and you want to tint it so you can get some, like metals can have a lot of tint in their specular. So if I would take this, I can start to get, you know, a coppery look. So just like that, you can make very simple metal material. Then we can modulate the roughness and all of these with a map. But as far as metal goes, that's as simple as that. Now you can do like a brushed metal, or let's say if you're doing a hair, they have a specific type of reflection that it's called anisotropic reflection. So if I take the anisotropy and I bring it all the way to 1, you're going to see it's going to start to smear the object. Now I like exaggerated this on a grand scale, but start to kind of tone it down. You're going to see it start to smear the reflection. And then you have the rotation, which is going to control which way it's going to smear. So if I do it like this, it's going to smear this way instead. And you can apply maps. So if you apply like a swirl map, so you're going to get like swirls effect. So like a brushed metal, like on like a metal pot, you have like this swirl brush look. This is one of the ways you can get something like that going on. All right, let's disable the anisotropy and dial the roughness down a bit. And let's move on. Let's see what else. Let's make a glass. So if we go to assign favorite material now, I have AI standard surface. I don't need to hunt through that new window. That's why I added it. All right, so a glass surface, I'm gonna bump up the weight to 1. A glass means refraction, which is called transmission in Arnold. So if I take the weight, if I bring it all the way up to 1, I get a glassy looking material. um, like I said, Arnold is made to be able to get to a very high result very quickly, and then the render times can be slightly slower, for example, than some other engines, but the point is you're going to spend less time tweaking and more time being creative and just, iterate until you get it perfect, and then you just send it to the farm, and that's the logic behind it. So why is my glass blurry? Well, it's kind of like frosted glass almost. Well, this is dependent on the roughness of the reflection. The specular and the transmission are linked in their roughnesses. So if I set this to 0, it's going to be perfect reflection and perfect refraction. All right. So as soon as I start to bring this up, the roughness starts to bend the reflection or soften the reflection, but also does the same thing to the refraction. So just something to keep in mind. So if you want to have a refractive object with a reflective, a sharp reflection, so if you want blurry refraction but a sharp reflection, what you can do is you can bump this guy up, make it as rough as you need, and then you can use the coat on the top to introduce clear reflections. Okay, and the coat is yeah, it had roughness, so if I disable it, you're going to see what I mean. Or what you can do, if I disable the coat, you can have a different scenario where you have a very sharp reflection, but you have extra roughness, so you can do this as well. So you have a very sharp reflection over here in general, and then you use the extra roughness to get this effect. So different ways of doing the same thing pretty much, with a slight difference. Now here's a very cool thing that Arnold has about glass. So if I take out the roughness to 0, and if I just give it a little bit more roughness, and if I zoom in to some of these edges, look what happens when I start to change the dispersion Abbey. So if I set this to 1, for example, it's going to start to color the refraction. Oh, this is an extreme example, but let's actually, don't be so crazy. Let's go 0.2. So it's going to start to tint the reflection, and it's going to start to break it into the individual colors like red, green, and blue. And if you see, there is some parameter here that we can use. If I click this, this is going to give me a preset for a diamond. So if I do this, and if I zoom in, you're going to see the edges of the reflection, they start to break apart into the primary colors. And this is a lot more realistic is going to give you very realistic results. Now, it can introduce some noise and it can be a little bit slower to render, so just kind of use it with caution. Alrighty, I'm going to kill the dispersion a bit to 0. We don't need it at the moment. Let's see, what else can we do? What's common? Skin. Let's do skin. Assign favorite. Now, skin is subsurface scattering, SSS. So in SSS kind of scenario, the light goes in and scatters in the object before it exits. So that means that because the light can transmit inside, it can scatter inside before it goes out. It's going to give you a soft illuminating kind of almost like effect. So let's see what I mean by that. So I go to subsurface, and if I turn it on, subsurface is a kind of like the metallic. You can, like, if you're talking about skin, like if you're talking about artificial material, you can have like slightly subsurfacey, like a rubber. But skin is 100% subsurface material, right? Unless you have a paint on top, for example, or like mascara or something. So I'm gonna the base color doesn't do anything. If this is set to 1, you can change this as much as you want. It's not going to affect anything because this is overriding this tab completely. All right. So if I take the subsurface color, and if I change it to something like this, we're starting to see a skin, almost skin-like effect. Now, you have different types of subsurface scattering in Arnold. The most realistic one is random walk V2. And Arnold by far has the best skin shader in the industry at the moment. Um, it's one of the most accurate algorithms that you can have for calculating. It's a little bit slower to render compared to the diffusion one, for example, but the results are like day and night different. So we're gonna stick to random walk V2 for now. Something to keep in mind about SSS is, well, basically all the shaders, but SSS in particular, is the scale of the object dictates how the object is going to look a lot. So let's do this. I'm going to click on the subsurface color. These 3 lines, everywhere you see these, if you click them, it means there's a preset. So it's apple, chicken, whatever, and you have skin 1 and 2. Let's pick skin 1. Look how waxy and translucent this looks. It doesn't look like skin. If I zoom out, if I take the sphere, if I scale it up, all of that translucency is gone and it starts to look a lot more solid. Now, why is that? Scale. So scale matters a lot in Arnold. Just keep that in mind. Now, what if you have to be in a small scale? Well, you have a scale parameter over here that can be like 0.1, and this is going to scale down the overall effect. So you kind of cheat a little bit. So you can get away with this, but usually like you try to work with real world scale. That will give you the most realistic results possible. Right, so subsurface color and radius. So if you have a texture, let's say this was a human and you have a texture, you would plug it into the subsurface color, and the radius is where you would control the subsurface effect. Now, if I click this value, even in the documentation in Arnold, it's very nicely described, is these 2 values represent the 3 layers of skin: the fat, the skin, and the blood vessels. So these values are not just arbitrary values to give you the color you picked. You can just take the color picker and just pick a random color for your subsurface, but that's going into stylized territory. If you want to be realistic, if you want to stay, physically accurate and all that jazz, then you really need to research these values and see these are measured values to get this color. These are not arbitrary values. And this is coming from the documentation. So all of these measured things, if I go to the apple or if we go to the ketchup, all of these values in this one or this one are measured from the actual material in real world to kind of give you this exact perfect look. So you can be more artsy and playful and choose your own, but it's recommended that you stick to the realm of physicality if you want the most accurate results. What else can we do? Let's do, what about fabrics and stuff like that? So let's go assign new material, Arnold standard surface. Let's restart this guy. All right, so let's see if we get like a blue, let's say it's a blue shirt that is like nice and soft looking. So I'm gonna disable the specular and I'm gonna go all the way down and it's gonna say sheen. I'm gonna open that up. So as soon as I start to dial this in, I'm gonna start to see almost like a rim light effect start to happening on the side, on the glancing angle. So how I rotate, it always stays around the object. All right, and then I can pick this color again and I can make it brighter and maybe a little bit more green into it, and yeah, a little brighter as well. So this is a very, very nice way to create soft fabric materials. And then you have the roughness, which is going to control how much of this effect is going to go towards the edges. So if I just bump this up, it goes towards the edges, or if I dial it in, it falls off only towards the edges, or it starts to go towards the middle as well. So you can control the softness of that gradient with the roughness. It's a very useful, and I use it for pretty much all the fabrics that I make, unless it's like a plasticky kind of like a jacket that it has some like reflective properties. All right, let's do one more. So favorite, let's see, what else can we do? Let's say, what if we make this transmission? So we have a glass and we don't have any roughness. What is IOR? Well, IOR stands for index of refraction, and this is controlling how much reflection you're going to see on the object that is on the facing part of the object, and how much is going to be pushed to the side. So IOR is something that you can Google on the internet and you can find the proper values, or you can just click here and you can see cornea, diamonds, glass, ice, water. So water, for example, has 1.33. Glass has 1.54 and up. Where is it? Glass, there you go. Yeah, so 1.5. So this changes. If I start to push this, you're going to see the reflection and the refraction will start to change. And if I go closer to 1, look what happens. If I go 1, it's going to disappear, because 1 is an IOR of the air. How trippy is that? So if I start to increase this, start to come back. Okay, now let's go all the way down and check out thin film. So you have thickness. So if I start to enable thin film, I can set the IOR to 1, which is pretty much air, and I get a glass bubble. Now the thin film effect, if I push it, it's going to start to colorize, and it's going to give you very, very interesting result. Now you can use these for insects, kind of the yeah the coat on the insect, or like an oil stain or something like that, that they have these kind of properties. So you can use this for a variety of of different effects. Oh, like a soap bubble also have this, but it's a lot more subtle. And you have the IOR, to control this effect. All right, and let's see what we're gonna make of this one. Actually, I'm gonna use this one to show you something else. So favorite, assign favorite standard surface. So if you go to material attributes, you get this effect, and you click on presets, you have a lot of presets here that you can use. So let's see, you have clay, boom, instant clay shader. What do you want? Gold, done. So these are very, very useful to have like a starting point. Car paint, this is like a two-layer material, which has like the soft specular and the coat on top that we talked about in this guy. So this is a very, very good way to just give yourself a head start. Balloon shader. Look how cool that is. That's amazing. Yeah, this is a great way to kind of give you a head start. Actually, I'm going to duplicate this one more time. And I want to just do one more material before we wrap the chapter up. So we go assign favorite, standard surface, and I'm gonna do this set to 1. I'm gonna disable the specular for now, and I'm gonna go to emission. Emission is gonna turn the object into a light. It's gonna start to glow it. So if I set the color and I start to dial in the weight, you're gonna see it starts to glow until it becomes a glowing object. And if you disable the weight of the base, it's going to pretty much become a solid glowing object. All right, and then you can also turn on reflection, which will give you very interesting results. And you can also introduce a little bit of a base, so you can mix these colors. So if you take this guy and if you make it redder or orangey, you're going to start to mix. Alrighty. Now this is not to be confused with the mesh light, which turned this object into a physical light. This is just a glow effect on the shader level. Cool. So this would kind of wrap up the material chapter. Next chapter, we're going to look into textures, procedurals, what can we do with it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So check that one out, and I'll see you guys in the next one.